There's lots of accumulation of dust here. You can basically guarantee that there's a lot of dust that's accumulated in here as well. So I'll take a Q-tip with a little bit of acetone or alcohol, and I just go clean up these heat filters and the mirrors. And if there's a lot of dust, I definitely get in there. If you had minimal dust, like in the case of this one, I would leave this alone. Just try to use a soft touch. But then I replace this, and the next stage of this is the light source. So this is, the Leica stands are, it's very important that your customers understand, and this goes across the board for all microscopes, but the Leica microscopes are unique because the power supplies for the lamps die consistently. If you haven't already changed one out, you're going to change one out. And the reason that happens is these bulbs are rated for 500 hours. But they'll run 2,000 hours. It's not like a halogen bulb. So a halogen bulb, in a halogen bulb system, if we were looking at that, halogen bulb's going to burn out. It's not going to do any, wreak any major havoc on the microscope electronics when it does that. In the case of a xenon bulb, it's gas, and it doesn't typically burn out. So they'll run, upwards towards 2,000 hours. When they do that, they draw more power from the power supply, and that power supply starts to just fail. It can't keep on giving this major output of energy to a dead bulb over a long period of time. So this bulb, for a 400 watt bulb, it's $1,350. For a power supply, your customer is going to pay upwards towards $10,000. So it's just like, the way I approach it with the customer is I tell them it's just like doing oil changes on your car. If you don't do oil changes in your car, the amount of cost that's going to be accrued in those repairs is going to be immense. Same deal here. So we want to train the customer to always change these out at 500. So the first thing I do is, before I turn the unit on, I will pop this door after I've checked the brake and the casters. I will check the bulb timers. In this instance, both of these bulb timers are dead. So I have a 3-strike system. That's my first strike. If I see the bulb timer is dead, it means that it's been in there long enough to where the battery is dead now. I still don't know how many hours are on these individual bulbs. So at this stage, the next thing I do is I'll pop this off. I'll pop these out, and I'll look at the heat sinks. On the inside of these heat sinks, if there's a lot of dust that's accumulated over time, and this has a little bit, but you'll see it where there's a ton of dust bunnies on the inside there. If there's a lot of dust that's accumulated, and on the inside of this reflector, on the back side, the mirrored reflector, sometimes you'll start to see black burning. If I see black burning and a lot of dust on the inside of this heat sink, that's strike 2. So now we're upwards towards, typically if I have 2 or more strikes, it means these bulbs need to be replaced. I don't even question it, right? But I'll take it the next step further. So I check that. If both of these bulbs, in this instance, have a little bit of dust, we have dead timers here. This one has very minor burning on the back end of the reflector, and this one doesn't have any burning on the reflector. So it's still a question, we don't know. Then what I'll do is I come up to the bulb timer on the unit. So at this stage I would power on the unit, I'd let it go through its paces. Then I wait, I go to the maintenance menu, and the maintenance menu is going to give me an hour count. So right now, we have lamp 1 that says 6 hours, and lamp 2 that says 191 hours. So typically, what you'll find is something like this, where the counts don't necessarily correspond to anything here, right? There's some sort of discrepancy. Either it's like seemingly a brand new bulb, even though the bulb timer is dead and we have dust inside the heatsink, or the hour counts. If the hour counts are really high, then it's immediately I change them. There's no question about it. But typically you don't see that the hour counts in the database are high. You usually see something weird like this, where you see 6 hours even though you know that's an old bulb. That's strike 3. So strike 3 is if there's any sort of discrepancy between the bulb timer and the bulb timer here in the database, then I make sure to replace those bulbs. So to go over this database does not link to the bulb in any form or fashion. So the count starts when you reset this. So you reset it by double clicking that, and it'll reset to 0. So it counts from 0 up to 500. So that's important, because either somebody's gone in and done just what I've done, say they got a message, error message, they went into the maintenance menu and they changed it themselves so that way they didn't have to get that error message, or somewhere along the line the hour count has just changed. So once I've done a PM and I'm consistently doing PMs on a microscope, I can start to get a sense of the patterns that the OR uses this microscope. So I'll have a better sense if, I'll know what the hour counts are on these bulbs typically. But when you're first starting, or you just showed up at a facility, you've never touched these microscopes before, you have to set the standard. And the standard is, if there's any discrepancy here, you're changing those bulbs out. And the way that I explain it in the text of the service report is I say, the bulbs are rated for 500 hours. They have to be replaced consistently in order to maintain the integrity of the power supply. There's discrepancies between the hour counts of the bulb timer and the database, and there's dust inside the heat sinks of the bulb modules, and there's burn marks in the reflectors. I make sure that I lay all of that out, line by line by line. So that way, Biomed has a very clear and distinct understanding of what the expectation is. Right? And then right after that, I follow up and say, these bulbs need to be replaced, see below for pricing. And it immediately lands in the line items of the parts. So now we have $1,200 for the brake replacement. We have $1,350 on both these bulbs. So now your PM went from $145 to upwards towards $6,000, right? If I see this, if I see discrepancies, and I've seen a whole array of things. I've seen 300 watts and a 400 watt. I've seen really old bulbs in the system. Hour counts just erratic. Just seen a variety of different things. If I see that, this is an opportunity to inform the staff, teach the staff. So I actually take the time to reach out to the coordinator, and I'll explain to them, listen, same thing I just said to you. This bulb is rated for 500. You can run them well beyond that. It's extremely important that when you get that error message that you call me, and my number will be right here on your microscope, or you call Biomed and have it replaced. I will also go to Biomed and be very clear about that. Typically at that stage, you sometimes will get some pushback from Biomed. Some Biomeds, they think that they're rated for like 750. You might hear a variety of different things. You need to set your standard. Your standard is 500. The bulbs that we supply and the bulbs that OEM supplies are rated for 500 hours, and they have to be changed in that time frame. So just making sure that you do that. When I come back out and I replace those bulbs, if it's an older unit, let's say an OH3, doesn't have a bulb timer counter in here, what I'll do is I'll physically date the bulb module. I'll take a marker and I'll date it. And I'll tell the staff, listen, next year when I come out, if the bulb timer's dead and we have a series of features that make me feel like the bulb needs to be replaced, I'm going to come back to staff and say, how often are you using the microscope? How many times a week? What are your hours per week that you're typically using this? And then I'll kind of work backwards and figure out, have they exceeded their 500? I do that as a service to the customer so that way I build trust with the customer. That way they know I'm not just randomly shotgunning light bulbs every single time that I feel like something is bad. And I'll also make that distinction with Biomed so they know that I'm actually trying to do my best to keep these up and running at the best, to their hour counts. So once I've addressed the light bulbs, then I'm on to the control unit. So at the control unit, typically what I would do is, the first thing I would do is I would go into the service dialog. Plug in your passcode, whatever that is. On the OH6, you're going to be faced with this. It immediately shows you the setup screen. So balancing audio signal, show microscope data and MDRS, lamp defective pop-up. This is key. So sometimes you'll see that this is cycled off. What that is